So we're live here on YouTube. It's Friday the 19th of June. I can see we have a good group already gathering. So again, would love to begin. Just let's get where are you connecting in from, and let us see who's here on our YouTube live as we start out. So where are you connecting from? City, where are you coming in from? And again, always love to get questions. Wahida, great to see you again. Erin, Paris. Linda, sunny New York City. Alan, Sláinte, same to you. Agus Banach Delat, Cologne, Germany. Chadia, Lebanon, fantastico. Morocco, Accra, Ghana, wow. This is truly a global group that we have on here. Slovakia, Beirut, Lebanon, Abir from Amman, Jordan. Okay, good to see you. Algeria, Robert from London. Hope all is good there in London. London was the last travel that I did before lockdown, so feels like a long time ago. Los Angeles, Dina, great to have you here. Swaraj, India. Gigi from Qatar, Doha. Krishna from India. Libya, Egypt. Marwa from Morocco. Austria, Sebastian, great to have you here. Pakistan, Roger, great to have you. And Roger, loved your questions last week. I hope there's some good questions coming here. And the theme for this session is really about purpose, and I sort of titled it Means and Ends. And very often people have a big confusion between what's a means and what's an end, and I'd love to get some questions in here. So Inglese in Pilole, good afternoon. Somalia, great to have you here. Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Algiers. So again, I'm seeing some faces that we've definitely had in here before, and I love questions. So I'm gonna let you put some questions in here, and I think we'll run this session much more driven from the questions through chat than some of our past sessions. So Inglese, Roman, Alexa from Russia, what questions do you have? What questions do you have about life? What questions do you have about YouTube? What questions do you have that are just on your mind here on Friday, the 19th of June? Munes from Houston, Texas. I've never been in Texas. In fact, there's a joke about Texas. There's an Irishman, and he meets this Texan. And the Texan is in a pub in Ireland, and the Texas guy says to an Irishman in a pub, "My land is so big that if I entered from one end of my ranch and drove all day and all night, I would still not reach the other ends of my ranch." And the guy from Ireland says, the roads are really bad here in Ireland as well. So I guess land is big in Texas would be the sense I get from that. I've never been in Texas. Krishna, there's a small question. How to know the purpose of our life. So that's a big one. Faisal, failing in great things better than success in small things. Yeah, so there's a question here. How do you know if you're failing in the great things or you're succeeding in the small things? How can you tell? Wahida, how can we be a good teacher for our children? Dina, ethical leadership is hard, pressure. I think it sets you free in many ways. Dina, I like that question. And hopefully we have our chat cam working again. So I'll switch up for Dina's question here. Let me make sure I got the text. That ethical leadership, and the saying that ethical leadership is hard. But Dina is saying that it sets you free in many ways. One of my mentors, Warren Rustand, is famous for saying that stress does not exist. And we teach a 1-week course every year together in Washington. And every year people challenge him that, stress exists, I felt it. Stress exists, I felt it. And Warren Rustand says, no, stress does not exist. If you know what's important, if you know how much time you have, if you know who's important, there's no stress. Your priorities are clear. The tension comes when you're unclear about your values. You're unclear about what's important. You're unclear about who is important. And Warren is a very interesting individual. One of the things that he carries with him at all times is a list that his father had him write when he was 20 years old. And it's a list of the 100 things that Warren wanted to do in his life. And he wrote it when he was 20 years old. It's on a yellow piece of paper in the handwriting of a 20-year-old. And to this day, Warren is in his mid-late 70s. He still carries this document with him. It's inside a plastic folder to protect it. And of the 100 things that Warren set out to do in his life, he's done 98 of them. The two that he hasn't accomplished: number one, be US president. Number two, travel to all of the known countries of the world. And he's pretty well up there on the countries. And I think the president of the US, the idea that a 25-year-old or a 20-year-old had over what it meant to be president, what it meant to be a political leader in the limelight, was something that I think he realized was going to be too big an issue for his family. That the choice that he might make to enter politics is not just an individual choice of him, but that the choice of entering politics puts your entire family on a stage, in particular in US national politics. And I think what's impressive with Warren is this idea that stress comes when you're unclear in what's important. When you're clear on what's important. And for Warren, it's written down. He doesn't carry the 100 things he set out to do in his head and hope to remember. He wrote them down, and he carried the list with him everywhere he went. So I think, Dina, this idea, ethical leadership, if you lead from what is right, it takes a lot of stress away. Because to me, a lot of stress comes from feeling that I'm letting someone else down. A lot of stress comes from not being absolutely clear with another what they can expect from me. One of my goals for this year is to be much, much more explicit in my agreements. There's a book called The Four Agreements. I forget the author of it, but it's a great book just on how lazy we are in setting out our agreements with people and how dangerous it is when you don't take time to establish what you can expect from me and what I can expect from you. And whether this is a family, a company, a team working together, the governing body of a school, the governing body of a business, that not taking time to be absolutely explicit about what is expected from you and what you can expect from me is a recipe for stress. But Dina, I think if you can get clear about who you are, who's important to you, and what is truly right, it clears up a lot. A lot of stress comes from looking for others to validate you, validate whether you're right or you're wrong. I run a session in IESE, in the business school. I run it less often now, but certainly 10 years ago I ran this session in the middle of a course. I would come into the classroom and I would just wait until the 70 students had noticed me. I would wait a minute or two until there was silence and people were looking at me. And I would ask the question, what is the objective? And what would happen in the class would be sort of nervous shifting, people waiting for somebody else to speak. And finally, someone would put their hand up and say, of what? Of this class? Of this course? Of this school? Of life? Of what? And I would make no gesture on my face, no movement with my hands, and I would just keep eye contact with this person until they spoke again. And maybe they would say, well, the objective of this class, to learn to communicate. The objective of life, to be happy. And, usually at that response, someone else would shift and say, is this what it's about? Is it about life? Is it about this course? And I would refuse to write anything on the board or give any gesture about whether the answer was right or wrong. And we would start to get people saying of life, to be happy, it's not just to be happy, it's to be of service, to be useful, to contribute. And someone else would say, well, but you got to live your life. You got to give to your family to be wealthy. And a lot of ideas would come out. But on the whole, what people were looking for was for me to show some sign that their answer was right or was wrong. And I would allow the tension and the anxiety in the class to just build and build. And sometimes in the class, someone would get so frustrated and so angry, they would shout like, what is this? What are you doing? And about 20 minutes in, I would say, there are some voices we are not hearing. So all the 25, 30 people who just stayed quiet and were just passively watching all felt I was speaking to them, and some hands started to go up. And it would take a long time until you saw someone who just raised their hand and said, this is the objective. And they gave an answer, and that answer came from inside them, and it was not looking for me to approve it, to validate it, to give it an A, a B, a C, or a D. It was an answer that was coming from inside. Another exercise that I've seen and used when we run mentorship programs is you just repeat the question, who are you, whilst maintaining eye contact with someone. And when I run mentoring sessions where we put together pairs of a mentor and mentee and set them up for a year-long program of mentoring, one of the exercises I have them both do is sit down, look directly into the eyes of the other, don't break eye contact, and ask the question, who are you? And no matter what you hear, repeat the question, who are you? And what you'll see here is the first who are you, you'll get the LinkedIn's curriculum summary. I'm this job, I'm this person, I'm this title. The second question, you might get, I'm a person, I'm a father. The third time, the fourth time. After about the fifth or the sixth, who are you? You started to get down to the essence of what someone feels that they truly are. No titles, no abstractions, but who's important, what's important, what do I stand for? And these exercises, I think that exercise of having someone look you in the eyes and just keep asking, who are you? It's intense. And it's powerful the way it gets an access to what is essential to who you are. I've over the last 12 weeks of quarantine, one YouTube channel that has really started, it just popped up in my YouTube feed, but I've really started to watch it a lot, is an Indian spiritual guru called Sadhguru. And he talks about, we have a choice of how much energy we put into life. Some people live life fully on, they're fully present, they're really here. Some people are living half on. Some people are almost off. They're just on life support through life. And he says the quality of the life is the engagement and the energy and the presence that you put into each moment. One of the things about this exercise of who are you, who are you, who are you, and just keep asking, but don't break eye contact, is no matter how close to life support you are, this level of intense stare of someone just looking into you and keeping asking, who are you? Who are you? Really switches you on and really accesses something deep and really brings you totally present to hear, so that your answer really connects to who you are. So Dina, I think, yes, knowing who you are simplifies life. Knowing who is important simplifies life. Knowing what values you wish to live your life by really simplifies decisions. Warren Rustan says there is no stress in his life. He knows what, who, and which values are really important to him, and there's no difficult decisions. Doesn't mean that there's not a cost in living that way, but definitely he sleeps well at night and has incredibly good relationships with the people that really matter to him. So let's what's happened here? Let's see where we've got Marwa. The Four Agreements is by Don Miguel. Yes, Don Miguel Ruiz, I think. Don Miguel Ruiz is the author of The Four Agreements. So we're back on to chat cam here. Michael, you're welcome, and thank you for sharing your shorts. Quite valuable as always. I think my wife would say that, she says, Conor, you're terrible on vacation. She says, when you're at work, and typically for me, work is a classroom with 70 or 100 or 200 people. And she says, when you're at work, 200 people listen to you. They applaud when you're finished, and they have questions about, and they want you to sign your autograph. She says, that's you at work. When you're on vacation, your daughters have heard all your stories. They don't have any questions for you. No one applauds when you finish speaking, and no one really wants to hear from you. So to me, these 12 weeks of losing the access to having groups of people that come, and I hope they take something from my stories, but I definitely leave a class after sharing stories and sharing experiences and coaching others. I leave with greater energy. So you guys here in this YouTube live stream, I finished this with more energy. I finished this with more clarity. I think in the early weeks I didn't, with all the different pieces moving and trying to connect to YouTube and trying to keep things going. I really struggled to figure out where to pay attention. But now I sort of don't worry too much. I think we've got camera here. We've got 71 connected at the moment. There's a few more good questions in there. Let me see if we can. So Chadia. Yes, sometimes one of the hardest things in keeping us from building our own path is the guilt of letting go of the work, the team, the company we've been working for a long time. Or is it just fear in disguise? Guilt. Let's go back to our camera here to talk guilt. So Chadia, what is it that holds us back? There's an idea that I came across many years ago about the journey of becoming a mature adult human being. And I think this comes from the Buddhist tradition. And the idea is we pass through every 7 years a phase of growing. And 0 to 7 is a phase where you discover that you exist. So 0 to 7, if at the age of 7 you have fully you know that you exist. You know that you exist as an independent entity, separate from your parents, separate from others, connected but independent. That's the first phase of life. 0 to 7, realize that I exist. So, and there are people that don't ever achieve this. If you had early caregivers that were narcissists, and a narcissistic parent makes you feel responsible for their feelings. A child that has been brought up by narcissistic parents will feel that they don't have an independent existence. In some way, they feel responsible for the emotions of their mother or their father or an early person around them. So it is possible to get stuck and not finish this phase of development, 0 to 7, of realize I exist as an independent entity. That my feelings are my feelings and your feelings are your feelings. And I don't need to take responsibility for another person's feelings. I can take responsibility for my action. I can have done a wrong action and feel an emotion, but your emotion is your emotion. My action, whether it connects to the highest values that I espouse or not, is a different thing. So 0 to 7, I exist as an independent life. 7 to 14, others exist. And not that they exist out there. They exist in as complete a way as I exist. I have goals and dreams and aspirations. 7 to 14 is realizing that every other human being and possibly every other life has its own goals, its own perspective, its own search. And completion of this second phase, 7 to 14, realizing others exist, is that you treat your own goals and dreams and objectives as vitally important, but you treat other humans' goals and dreams and aspirations as equally important to your own. Someone who doesn't pass this phase, 7 to 14, effectively uses others as vehicles or sees them as obstacles. So somebody that has a very transactional way of engaging with other people is someone that got stuck in 7 to 14 in never appreciating that others' lives are as rich as your own. Others' goals are as important to them as mine are to me. And getting stuck 7 to 14 is you form transactional relationships, but not trusted relationships, not relationships that transcend an exchange. And there's many people that have not passed this phase, that they are an independent existence, but most of their interaction with other people is a transaction. It's not a relationship of trust. Martin Buber, the philosopher, called this an I-thou relationship, one where the other is not an external vehicle or an obstacle that is getting in your way. They are a thou, and thou is a sort of holy term that their spirit, their goals, their purpose is as vitally important to this universe as my own. And only when you can appreciate people in that way can you transcend a transactional relationship and have deeply trusted relationships that begin to be relationships of love. The third phase, 14 to 21, is a phase called kill your parents. And this is a metaphor, not a literal claim. And kill your parents is take down from pedestals everyone you have above you. And so from 14 to 21, it's quite common that people see some people as being better than them, having more than them, having something that I don't have. And the father figure, the mother figure, the mentor, these are idealized concepts we have of someone who we put on a pedestal. And from 14 to 21, you'll have some heroes. You'll have people that you see that they have something that you don't believe is in you. But the work of going from 14 to 21 in healthy maturity is destroying all the pedestals, realizing everything that is in any other person is also in you. Every great value, every great capacity, every positive thing, it's also somewhere in you. It may be that you've not put energy into developing it, but there's nothing missing in you. And also everything that you judge someone else as lesser than you, worse than you, that flaw is also in you. And successfully transiting the 14 to 21 phase of maturity as a human being is to reach to a point where you don't put anyone above you, you don't put anyone beneath you. There can be people who have more than you because they've invested more energy, they've put more effort into becoming competent. But if you chose to put the same energy in, you could begin to move towards that. And I think for me, this phase, if you get stuck in this phase where you believe that some outside thing demonstrates is going to fill the emptiness inside. So someone who hasn't successfully passed this adolescent phase of maturity tends to be very materialist, tends to accumulate things to hide the sense that there's something missing inside them. And someone who hasn't transited this 14 to 21 tends to set external goals, tends to look to accumulate, tends to value status, tends to value validation in the eyes of others, in society, their parents, to a much, much higher extent than is healthy for a good human existence. So to fully transit this is to realize that you can validate yourself, that there is nothing missing in you, that it can feel good to receive praise from others, but you need to be a powerful source of praise to yourself. And if you can achieve this, where you realize there's nothing missing, that there's no one who has something that you will never have, equally there's no one worse than you that is categorically beneath you, but it's always a choice of where you put your energy, then you stop being addicted to materialism to fill the hole that you feel is inside you. And this emptiness that each of us feels inside us, there's no human that doesn't have that emptiness inside. It's not that if you're wealthier that emptiness would go away. I am an Irish person who's lived outside of Ireland for most of my adult life. When I moved to Barcelona, I thought I would love to feel like I'm home. And I think the thing that I thought that people had that I didn't have was a sense of home, a sense of place, a sense of growing up where they are and walking down the street and feeling this is home. That I'm in Barcelona as an Irish person. If I speak, my accent in Spanish makes it clear that I'm not native from here. And I spent a lot of time thinking that if I could feel like I was home, then life would be good. And my materialism, my search for success was a lot driven by a sense that there was something missing in terms of roots and home. And it took me discovering that almost no one has this home, this sense of home that I had idealized. And this phase 14 to 21 is really taking all the ideals that you have, all the expectations you have of how others will play a role, will fix things, taking them out, removing them. And to me, my father is just a human being. He doing his best and getting on in life. And I think this destroying the pedestal, allowing people to not play up to some idealized role that you have, allowing yourself not to play up to some idealized role, but just getting all the expectations out and wondering how they got in there, but putting them out. That's so important. So I lost track of quite what we were going on there, but those phases of life, I think you can get stuck in a phase. And if your seeking is materialist, it's probably that you've been stuck in this phase of you're still putting people on pedestals and you're putting some people down beneath you. As long as you see anyone on this planet or anyone who's ever lived as above you, and as long as you see anyone who has ever lived as beneath you, worse than you, you're going to have some need to fill that hole with material or outside you things in an attempt to fill the hole. So Chadia, I hope that somewhat philosophical rant kind of touched onto this idea, and maybe one of our future videos we can go through what is the full lifespan of humanity and what are each of those stages that we go through. So Chadia, great that that happened. Linda, virtual clapping is very much accepted at this time. IESE Business School actually this week began to have students back in the classrooms, although it's only 1/3 of the class. So 1/3 of the class is sat physically in the classrooms. 2/3 of the class are still connected via Zoom. So we're still not back to normal, but I guess, do we want to go back to normal is a question. Faisal, set a goal that extends beyond our life. Is this an end or a mean to be eternal? So this is a good question. Let's switch back to our chat cam here. Carl Jung, Viktor Frankl, both of them talked a lot about the legacy project, and that human beings, that existential philosophy, and existential philosophy would view that the source of great fear, that the source of uncertainty and anxiety for a human being is our conscious ability to recognize that there's a time that we no longer exist in this body. We call it death, and I'm not going to get into technical description of which particular religious approach to death we're covering, but in this form, in this body, human beings live 75, 80, 90 years. If you're lucky, you don't have an illness, you have 90 years in this body, in this form, on this planet. And we know this. And I can remember I have two daughters, and both of them, somewhere quite soon after beginning to speak, have become interested in the question of what happens when people are not here. And I remember my elder daughter, for almost a year, when she was 4 or 5 years old, had a lot of questions of what happens if I die? When will she see me? So every one of us, when we're quite young, realizes that no one is here forever. No one has just been born and is sticking around forever. That there's an end. And Faisal, the existential approach is that until you come up with a way of being able to look at this, face this, accept this, you are going to have a set of mental troubles in life. Freud said all neurosis is the avoidance of necessary suffering. And one of the metaphors that the existentialists use to talk about looking at death, looking at the end, looking at coming to an end in this form, is staring at the sun. That to look at our own death is like staring at the sun. It's too bright and it's too painful, and we really are not able to just look straight into the sun. In order to transcend death, what the existentialist view is, human beings need a legacy project. And that's how, in some way, my life transcends this period that I'm here on Earth. And that legacy project for many human beings is your children. That they will outlive you. And all of the dreams and all of the things that you hope for yourself, you in some way push onto your kids. So this is one way of having a legacy project. It's not necessarily a great thing for your kids or for yourself. Other legacy projects, creating a work that lasts beyond you, a book, a work of art, an essay, a video. But both Jung and Viktor Frankl would work with people to try and help them come up with what is their legacy project. What is the way that their life means something after they're gone? And that this was part of the process of reducing anxiety and being able to live now. So Faisal, I think it is, the existentialists have some exercises to go through to clarify what is your legacy project, what will live on when you're gone. For me, the book from Tolstoy, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, connects to this legacy project. In the novel, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, Tolstoy tells the story of someone who's never really, he's found a way of avoiding thinking about life and death until one day a doctor tells him that he has only 2 months to live. And in those last 2 months, he has a massive crisis, and then he discovers a legacy project. The book, you can read it, you can download a PDF on Google just by searching, you can read it in less than an hour. So to me, that book, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, touches on this idea of what is a legacy project. And I often will give that as reading to groups of people before we go on a retreat to discuss this idea of what gives meaning to your life and what projects that you're involved in will transcend your time. I loved a question that I heard 2 years ago at the Vistage Global Chair meeting. And I forget the name of the speaker. She's an American poet, and she's young. And I remember she was introduced as the next Oprah, that this person was going to be the next Oprah. But her question, and it was quite a powerful speech coming from someone who's in their 20s to a room of Vistage chairman, average age probably 65, 70, all mentors to many CEOs. And she said, if your dreams come true, will it just change you or will it change the world? And I remember I wrote that down at the top of a page in my book and was reflecting on it for a long time. And I was wondering how many of my goals just changed my life. How many of my goals are really about improving conditions and quality of life for others? How many of my dreams, if they were to come true, would not just make my life better? And so many of my dreams are like have a bigger house, to have stuff. These are dreams that if they became true, my life would improve. But it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference for most lives. And I guess this idea of means and ends is, legacy project is a project where if it comes to pass, it doesn't just improve the quality of your life. If I want my company to be successful so that I can be rich, that's going to change my life, but it's going to be very hard to get some great people to engage and get around me and help me build this, because essentially they know it's a transaction. They're giving so that my life can be better. I can have a bigger house, I can own more land, I can have more money, I can do some stuff for me. So, defining a company not as a personal enrichment project, but a process by which you increase the quality of a lot of human lives is a way of transcending yourself, and also, Faisal, transcending your own time here on this planet. So, I would encourage you to have some time reflecting on this question. If all your dreams came true, would it just change you or would it change the world? And the world doesn't need to be 7.4 billion people. I think if you've got 2 kids or 3 kids, do your dreams include their life? If you have an extended family of cousins, of parents, do your dreams improve their quality of life, affect them positively? And I guess if not, then you don't have a legacy project. You have a project that is only for you in this lifetime. And it's not going to help you deal with the anxiety of staring at the sun. So let's see where we've got to on chat over here. Alexander from Kenya, great to have you on here. Howling, let's go down the bottom. Maitam from Iraq, Inglese and Pilole. Teaching and sharing knowledge is extremely rewarding, knowing that you can have a positive impact on people's lives. One of my teachers died in the 90s, but I think of him every day. That is legacy. And, to me, the teacher that had the greatest impact on my life, Eric Matz. I'll switch over cam here. So, teaching. And I think it's important that not everyone is drawn to be a teacher, but if it is in you to be drawn to be a teacher, then it is an incredibly rewarding process. But for me, age 14, I met the teacher that had the greatest impact on my life, Eric Matz, biology teacher. And I think about 10 years ago on my blog, I wrote a blog post, the best teacher I ever had. And I described Eric Matz and 3 things that I had taken from the year that I had Eric Matz as my biology teacher. And I put it up there. And I had never spoken to Eric Matz since I was 14. So I didn't remain in contact. But about 10 years ago, I posted on my blog this article, The Best Teacher That I Had in School. About 2 months later, the wife of Eric Matz wrote me an email. She said a friend had forwarded my blog post to her, asking if her husband was the Eric Matz that taught at this school. And she'd said yes. And she wrote an email to me reaching out to say that she told her husband and that thank you for the post. And in the next email, I asked her for their address. And she gave me their physical address, and I took a pen and a paper and I wrote a thank you letter to Mr. Matz. I find it hard to call him Eric Matz. I think most of my teachers were Mr. or Miss, and it's very hard when you grow and become an adult and you meet a teacher that has always been Mr. Matz. But I wrote him a letter, and I put in that letter who I was when I was 14 and I began in his class. I put in that letter who I am now, and I put in that letter how important a role he played in giving me the confidence to be myself, in giving me the encouragement but also the challenge, because he wasn't an easy teacher. He didn't let you get away. He knew whether you put effort, your best effort, into work, and he didn't let you get away with mediocre effort. And I let him know that the impact that he had on my life. So I think in inglese, in pilole, letting your teachers know and taking time to be grateful for the teachers you've had. And to me, what I worry about a lot of times is, of all the teachers that I had in school, one was this for me. And I do worry that young kids are not getting enough exposure to people who live inspiring lives. On the question of teaching, for me, the poem that I use as a reminder of what a teacher needs to be is a poem that John Wooden shared in his TED Talk. And the poem is, "No written word nor spoken plea can teach the youth how they should be, nor all the books on all the shelves. It's how the teachers are themselves." And I think this is more important now. 20 years ago, there wasn't Google, there wasn't the internet. A teacher was a source of information. Today, there's Google, there's the internet. A teacher's role is not to be a source of information. A teacher's role is not to have the answers. Google has the answers. A teacher's role is to give two things to a child: self-belief and confidence. And I believe where someone has self-belief, they believe that they're worthy, and confidence that if they do the work, they will become good, they're going to get onto Google and find the information and become great. The only reason someone today isn't great at something is because they don't believe they're capable of it, or they don't believe it's worthwhile. If someone believes they're capable and someone believes it's worthwhile, they're already working on it. They're already using the resources that are here in the world to make it happen. So teaching is not about information. Teaching is about putting two things deep into the soul of another person: self-confidence and self-belief. And if someone has these two, then they become just passionate about finding the resources. And I think it's amazing the world we live in today. My grandfather, when he grew up, if you wanted access to information, he would have had to come up from the countryside into Dublin. And in the Library of Dublin, there would probably have been 8% of all the books of the world. If he took the ferry across to England and the train down to London, maybe he could have had access to 20% of the books of the world. Today, you take your mobile phone and you put it into any cubic centimeter of the air around you, and every written word, every spoken word, every video ever made by humanity is available in that cubic centimeter. It is such a transformation of what humanity can achieve, what has happened from the age of the internet and the mobile phone. Every resource is available to us. The question about teaching becomes, in a world where all information is available, how do you give people the ability to navigate that themselves? How do you give them self-belief and self-confidence? So to me, having the chance to write a letter to Eric Matz, having the luck that I lived a life that he came across me when I was 14, and that gives me a sense of the only way I pay back what I received from Eric Matz when I was 14 is by me passing on the same thing that Eric did to me to as many people as I can pass it on to. And that is what I try and remember when I travel from here up the hill to go and teach in IESE Business School. That is what I bring when I think about how I lead Vistage here in Spain, and what our role is in helping CEOs of companies to think about their leadership, to think about the impact they can have, to think about how important their competence is in taking good decisions so that they can steward the companies that provide a livelihood to all the people and the families that are connected to their company. And to me, all of this goes back to Eric Matz, that age 14, I was an apathetic cynic, and it took his crossing my path, his absolute clarity about who he was. He didn't come into class looking for us to validate him as a good human being. He came in knowing what was important, knowing what is right, and knowing that the only place he wanted to be at that moment was here in this class with these 14-year-olds. He wasn't questioning whether he was paid enough or not. He wasn't questioning if this was the right thing or not. He was just fully present in that class with each of us, and sometimes breaking the rules, doing what it took to get a group of 14-year-old apathetic cynic boys to wake up to the incredible thing that it is to make the choice to live a positive life. So let's switch back here. Wow, time is flying by. It's 48. I think Florian, great to see you. Can Traver. Your legacy will be the smiles of people when they hear your name once you're physically gone. Well, Florian, in my list, so I have a speed dial list of people to call when I feel a need for motivation. And Florian Mueck is name number one. If ever I wake up and mid-afternoon my second coffee hasn't jolted me into a state of creativity, and I'm starting to feel, I don't know what to do, I pick up my phone and I dial Florian. And Florian, thank you for being that voice of positivity and encouragement at all times and always in life. It's always a pleasure, and I'm aiming to have smiles on my face around you many times before you're physically gone. So thank you for being here and part of life. Dina, do you accept criticism for talkers or only doers, people who lead themselves? Oh, let's switch over here. Criticism. I think there is a wonderful phrase that I've written down in one of my lists of great sayings, and it says, when anyone gives you advice, don't evaluate the quality of the advice. Evaluate the quality of the life of the person who's giving you the advice. And only if the quality of the life of the person who's giving you the advice is worthy in your eyes, do you process the advice. Now, it doesn't mean you tell people that their advice is crap. You just don't engage with it. And to me, I think philosophy is the wisdom of living well. And somehow in our century, philosophy is studied by academics who just study it in the head. They don't live it. I really pay attention to the quality of people's life. And I think the greatest way we can teach our children is not what we say, but what we do and how we live our lives, the choices that we make, the way we get clear on what is important and aware of the price that it will take to lead the life that we intend. I definitely, these last 12 weeks, I've had breakfast, lunch and dinner with my family. And that's a first. It's probably not since I was a kid at home that I've had breakfast, lunch and dinner in the same place for 12 weeks. And it's pushed me to question my values and where the energy and time of my life is going to. How much of my travel is Conor's ego related, and how much really is something that is necessary for me to live out my purpose on the planet. So I think post this 12 weeks of quarantine, I plan to reduce by half my travel next year. There's still some courses that I teach that I really feel that we get such great human beings into the room, and it's such a privilege to spend time with them, that I will definitely keep traveling to them. There's some business schools that I love teaching at because it's such a great environment to talk to people about the deeper questions of life. But there's a lot of well-paid trips to exotic places that I think are ego decisions of Conor, and these last 12 weeks have helped me clarify what it is to be part of a family in a real way, not just pop up on the weekends. But criticism, I am very careful just to look at the human being that is giving me the advice. And if I see in their life a life that's being well lived, then I will really take on board their advice. I think in one of these previous Q&As, I was talking about mentors. And that I very rarely ask a mentor, I very rarely ask anyone older than me for advice. What I ask them for is their own personal experience. I asked them, when they were my age, what was going on in their life? What was happening? What big decisions were they having to take? And instead of asking for advice, I get them to explain their own story. And very often, if I can listen to somebody else's story of how they dealt with the decisions they had to take when they were 47, what was on in their life when they were 47, what decisions they took at 47 that they're proud of 10, 15, 20 years later, what things they didn't do that they now regret 20 years later. That is where I really listen. So I think criticism, I very much want to see the quality of life of the person who's speaking. I hugely value feedback from people who their own life shows a well-lived, coherent, high-integrity, purpose-driven life. It doesn't mean criticism from everyone doesn't hurt. At the end of every course I teach at IESE, the program gets feedback, and at the end of every program, about 2 weeks later, I'll receive an email with a PDF, and it's all the positives that people said about my course on one side, and if you turn it over, it's all the points for improvement. And I would love that all the positive things were what I remember. Sadly, what I notice is when I turn it over, it's the negative stuff that sticks in my throat that hurts. So criticism, it still hurts. One thing that I really try and tell myself is never underestimate my power to encourage another person. And as a mentor, as a teacher, as a friend, I really want to overdo it when I can honestly tell someone that what they've done was excellent, was a great work, was impressive. I don't want to wait. I tell them. And I do give advice, and sometimes I do give criticism. My good friend Miguel, before he gives feedback, he's always very, very, very clear to ask whether the other person really wants to hear it. And I think advice that the other really wants to hear is a good thing. Advice that the other person didn't ask you for is called nagging. And I don't think there's anyone in history that has made a significant change in their life because they received advice that they didn't seek. So there's a wonderful Marshall Goldsmith video on YouTube where he's running a session, and there's like 100 people in the audience, and he asks them, right, most of you are married, you have a partner, right, great. Write down one thing you would love to change in your partner, your wife, your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. Write down one thing that if you could change in them, it would be wonderful. He says, has everyone written it down? Good, good. Everyone's written it down. And you can see 100 people in the room. They've got this change that they want to make in the significant person in their life. And they're waiting for Marshall to tell them how they can make this change happen. And Marshall says, good, everyone's got it written down. Tear it into 100 pieces. Burn this piece of paper. Now, new piece of paper. Is there something your partner has always wanted to do? Is there something that they really aspire to be? How can you help them there? He says, don't change them to the way you want them to be. Help them become the person they want to be. And if you can do that, then maybe they'll listen to your advice about the things that you can help them in what you want to be. And to me, this idea of, it's so easy to think about how I want to change someone else. It's a lot more difficult to think, how do they want to change themselves? What are they frustrated with? What are they seeking? How do I be a facilitator of the change that they're already trying to make in their own life? And how do I not care and not worry about the changes I think I would like them to make, often because I want to just improve my comfort. So, Inma, recommend us a good book for the summer. Oh, well, on my website, let me stick in my link of where is my book list. So that there, Kono.rs books, is a list of 20 books that if you've read them all, then great. But if you haven't, that's 20 great books to read. There's 3 sections, one set on leadership, one set on communication, and one set is biographies. And I think one of the greatest ways to learn about life is reading a biography. Not a to-do book, not a textbook, but a biography of someone else's life. And for me, I remember probably the first biography I read was the book Titan, which was the biography of Rockefeller, the creator of Standard Oil, richest man that has ever lived by inflation-adjusted terms. And it's very interesting to see his life and his start and the decisions that he took. So we're coming up to the end of our hour here. George, Emma, E4M, not-for-profit. Great to have you all on here. I'd love if all of you, just before we finish, one word in our chat here. What's your emotional state this Friday, the 19th of June? Reino, great to have you. Finland, one word here in the chat. And let us know, one word. What's the emotional state you find yourself as we finish this moment here together? MH, Tony Robbins. Hey, he's a good storyteller. And I think Tony Robbins has touched a lot of people's lives and got a lot of people started on the journey of taking responsibility for their life. So we got Marcelo, empathy. George, optimism. Inglese, grateful. Rathinam, hopeful. MH, excited. Alba, great to have you on here, Alba. Inspired. Afran, blessed. Mones, optimistic. E4, energized. Pankaj, wonderful. Kelvin, courage. Gregor, inspired. Hey, coffee is always allowed. Inspirational. Rathinam, grateful. Velinchik, inspired. Jagannath, finding out legacy project. And again, the death of Ivan Ilyich. I recommend you have a read and a deep think about that story. Sarah, inspired. John, positive. Linda, curious. I love that attitude to life. Wahida, motivation. Faisal, inspired. Yared, encouraged. Balaji from Virginia, you're very welcome for this inspiring, because everything that I put out here comes back. I feel good. Leon, boosted. Inglese, what's my own word? Weekend. My daughter's at horse riding. I'm going to go get my younger daughter, get in the car and drive out to the countryside just behind Barcelona, where my elder daughter is currently riding horses. Have a little walk in the countryside, begin our Friday evening. The summer is definitely getting started here in Barcelona. Hopefully we can do a little trip to the beach, maybe Castelldefels tomorrow morning. Dina, loving sunny day and life. Sarah, hey, Thank you. I love that you consider this authentic. It is very important to me to never be seen as a fraud, as someone who says things that are not resonating and lived in my life. Lancelot, persistence. George, enthusiasm. Pradeep, motivated. Faisal, ooh, the best. I don't know if I'm best. And careful with bests and worsts, because those type of judgments put someone on a pedestal. Faisal, there's nothing in me that is lacking in you. Inglese, I will enjoy our weekend. Jagannath, beautiful conversation. Thank you. George, love. Right, forward looking. Reino, I like that attitude. Fer Serrano, gracias por compartir. Un placer, Fer. Right, we're going to wrap up our number 16 Quaranstream. Dina, you two have a great weekend. Let's call it a wrap here on stream number 16. Have a great weekend. 3, 2, 1.